Mine is the first visit of a Canadian Prime Minister to China in nearly a decade. The world has changed much since that last visit. And I believe the progress that we have made in the partnership sets us up well for the new world order.
So it turns out that our prime chameleon, Mark's commie, is just that, a slimy reptile who changes colors at the drop of a hat. Less than a year after declaring China Canada's greatest security threat, he has now not only gone to meet with them, but has entered into partnership with them to, in his words, not mine, create the new world order. The fact of the matter is Mark Carney is feeling squeezed. He's feeling the pressure from all sides, whether it's leftist activist front groups that pretend to be Aboriginal groups at home, or the growing separatist movements across our country in Alberta, in the West, Quebec, or the reshaping geopolitical and economic landscape. Carney finds himself in between a rock and a hard place. And because he's a bureaucrat, he moves slowly. And with all the pressure increased, Marxism carnage is starting to show his true colors, namely that he is an unprincipled, progressive, globalist elite who would rather cozy up to tyrants and dictators than maintain a positive relationship with our neighbors to the south because they're conservative and Donald Trump is orange man bad. This episode exposes who Mark Carney truly is. It's January 16th. I'm Matthew Hallick, and this is Liberty Dispatch. Well, hey, and welcome back to the program, everybody. Thanks for joining us on the Dispatch yet again. If you like what we do, you know what you can do to help it get out to more people. And obviously, that's subscribing, that's liking, hitting the notification bell, sharing our content out with more people. That helps us be boosting the algorithm because let's be honest, the algorithm everywhere, even on X, devalues Canadian Christian conservative commentary and news and analysis. So if we're going to grow, if we're going to continue to touch on the things that you want to talk about, you have to support us. And you can do that by going over to our Substack page, ldcanada.substack.com, ldcanada.substack.com. Check out the full-length episodes of every single episode we have there, including some wonderful full-length interviews, more of which will be coming out from our 350th episode right away, pardon me. But before we get in the headlines, we have to let you know that our program is brought to you by our friends over at Rocklinc Investment Partners. Despite mounting pressure in recent years, DEI and ESG initiatives remain deeply entrenched and actively promoted by major financial institutions and investment firms. These divisive ideologies could be channeling your hard-earned cash and your dollars towards causes that clash with your core principles. That's bad. Rocklinc Investment Partners are committed to guiding Christians in building a secure financial future while investing in harmony with their faith and biblical stewardship. I cannot recommend them enough to you. Reach out to Rocklinc at 905-631-5462. That's 905-631-5462. Or email them at info@rocklinc.com. That is link with a C. I know you know it by now. Well, before we get into Mark's commies' recent trip to China, let's touch on the news that's breaking today. As of January 16, 2026, beautiful news. The Federal Court of Appeal confirms the Emergency Act was illegally used against peaceful protesters. So some nearly 4 years after the events, we have more confirmation from the appellate court here in Canada that Justin Trudeau's evil regime was totally inappropriate in their use of the Emergency Act, which was, its predecessor was the War Measures Act, against Canadian citizens, peaceful Canadian citizens who were advocating for their charter rights in the protest. And this is what Justice Center President John Carney had to say. This decision confirms what Canadians witnessed in real time in 2022. The Emergency Act was never meant to be used against peaceful citizens exercising fundamental freedoms. Mr. Carney added, today's ruling is a significant victory for the rule of law, for the principle that governments are bound by limits, even in moments of political pressure. Emergency powers must remain truly exceptional, or they cease to be compatible with a free and democratic society. What will come from this, that remains to be seen, but it's bad. The use, the invocation of the War Measures Act is really, really bad when even our corrupt courts agree that it totally is illegal and inappropriate. But we wanted to start with some good news. But let us get into the headlines. So before Marks Carney flew across the Pacific to China for his first of a long trip, which includes going to Qatar and then also the globalist WEF annual meeting 2026 in Davos. Before he got there, he set out this past Tuesday, January the 13th, and he made a coastal pit stop in British Columbia, Prince Rupert, to be exact. And he went there to speak with a leftist activist front group, the Coastal First Nations, regarding the proposed Alberta bitumen pipeline to Asian markets as outlined in the recent MOU with Alberta. So, Carney arrived in Prince Rupert to meet with approximately 60 leaders of this Coastal First Nations band, which is, as I said, a leftist anti-development group that poses as an Aboriginal agency. It does have some, 9 Indigenous bands that are a part of it, but nevertheless, it's a joke. It's not real. However, Carney, before going to China, he goes to meet with the CFN, and the ostensible reason is dialogue, discussion, collaboration, consultation on what Carney described as a pivotal moment for Canada. Listen to his words.
It's an important time for our country. It's a decisive moment for Canada, and I'm very focused on not just building, but how we build and how we build together. So today is really about a dialogue. It's a dialogue of what's been happening in the region, the projects that have been led by the various First Nations here, the various opportunities that do exist, the imperative of conservation, how we have been doing on conservation in this immense, precious natural heritage, which is a huge responsibility for all of us, but is core to the identity of the First Nations here. So how we work together to preserve that, to enhance it, we're looking for opportunities for development. So today's not a day for big announcements. It is a day, as I say, for dialogue, for listening and working. There will be a time for coming back with progress, particularly with respect to conservation.
So there you have it. Very measured in his tone, right? Not a day of big announcements. We're not announcing anything big. We're just responsibly talking to the stakeholders who are a part of this great nation, blah, 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 blah. But it's interesting because the CFN, well, they weren't as measured in their tone. Let's listen to what they have to say.
Hi, good afternoon. This morning, our coastal First Nations communities invited the Prime Minister here. We wanted to reiterate that anytime there is a discussion about our territories, that we need to be in the room. And that it is very important to us that the Prime Minister see our territories and understand our concerns. And that is why our leadership invited him to sit and meet with us directly. So today we heard directly from the Prime Minister that his government will seek our free, prior, and informed consent regarding any proposed projects in our territories.
This is important.
And that we will co-develop a transparent process moving forward. We are looking forward to partnering with the federal government to help facilitate projects in our territories that support sustainable economic development and marine protection.
There's that word.
We also made our positions very clear.
And here's the important
reiterated those positions around our stance regarding the oil pipeline, and that has not changed. Coastal First Nations, along with
it's
Black
not
Swans
happening.
and the Haisla Nation, oppose any project that proposed to bring oil tankers to the North Coast.
So there you have it.
We reiterated that there is no technology that can clean up an oil spill at sea, and that it would take just one spill to destroy our way of life.
So
we
overwrought,
shared
so
our
silly.
reliance on a healthy and intact ocean, and our determination to protect the ocean and the ecosystem that we rely upon. And it's a reliance not just on coastal First Nations, but Canadians and British Columbians.
So there you have it. We don't need to painfully continue to go through this video. But the point is, the CFN is not measured in the way that they're talking about this. They're very clear. It's not going to happen. The MOU is not going to happen. There is not going to be a West Coast pipeline sending our oil products to Asian markets. That is not going to happen. And furthermore, there will be no tankers coming to the West Coast. The tanker ban will not be lifted. And what you need to understand here is there's a game afoot. The CFN is not really real Aboriginal communities. This is a fake leftist, foreign-funded, American-funded, actually, left-wing, anti-development, green activist group. That's what they are. And the reason that Carney is meeting with them is because he's outsourcing, saying no to this bitumen pipeline to Asian markets, and the tankers being able to get into the West Coast to these radical activist groups. That's what's happening here. And that's why he's consulting with them. He doesn't owe them free, informed, prior consent, but that's what he committed to, according to them. And what does that mean? That means nothing in that MOU, which we've already talked. We talked to Dr. Wagner. You can check the episode out there about how the MOU was political theater. And this is political theater, right? This is Mark Carney outsourcing, saying no to ostensible Aboriginal bans so he can pretend to be big business, good pro-development, while actually nothing gets moved forward, which appeases his ideological green, some of the base there, with the Liberals, which is also beneficial to him, the net zero zealot who wants to forward a new green economy for him and his, buddies at Brookfield to benefit off of. So this is what Mark Carney has done even before he gets to China. He shoots the Alberta MOU in the foot, and we can be guaranteed that nothing is going forward if this is what Mark Carney continues to do. In fact, what we need is exactly what Pierre Poilievre has done, and that is to say, we will not go through the Aboriginal grift mill. We will not be extorted, right? Because the free and prior and informed consent is just a recipe for extortion. It means for you to do anything in your political or Canada's economic benefit, you have to grease our palms. And that is exactly what this racket is. The Aboriginal grift mill is an extortion racket. And our government goes along with it. It's part of our government policy. And that's what happened even before Mark Carney got to China. But after what amounted to some 3-hour meeting, Mark Carney flew over the Pacific by night and reached his destination in China. And we have the footage directly from Carney's X page. So there's Mark Carney setting down in Beijing, not greeted by Xi Jinping, but just some random Chinese bureaucrats. But there you have it, that pensive, very academic, smart-sounding music. That's Mark Carney, proud to be in China. And we should note, it's the first time that a Canadian prime minister has been in China for nearly a decade, since the idiot boy king, Justin Trudeau, the Liberal predecessor to Mark Carney, joined Xi Jinping and the Chinese in China in 2017. So, according to the Office of the Prime Minister of the Government of Canada, dated January 16, the leaders focused on renewing relationship between Canada and China in the face of a changing global economy and international security challenges. Very, very interesting, because back in April, just in April 2025, when pressed on security challenges and which ones Canada faced on the global stage, Mark Carney had this to say.
Mr. Carney?
Well, we're in a security section. I think we didn't have a chance to talk about anything internationally. I think the biggest security threat to Canada is China.
China, you say?
Yeah.
There you go. In no uncertain terms, just 9 months ago, Mark Carney said the biggest security threat to Canada is China. Now he and his Liberal government, feeling the pressure in an act of utter desperation, they fly over to Beijing to meet with Xi Jinping and his consulate for the first time since 2021. And what we must understand is the purpose, according to them, is to diversify our markets, right? It's the 5 pillars of the trip is energy, economic and trade policy, public and safety, multilateralism. That's an important one. We should do a whole episode on multilateralism, and culture. And the new MOUs that have been signed have been on energy cooperation, crime fighting, modern wood construction, culture, and food safety. And today we just had announced the resolution of the tariffs on Canada from China, where sometimes 100, sometimes 85% tariffs, especially on canola products, will be apparently, according to this agreement, reduced to something just about 15%. So here's what's absolutely stunning about the timing of Carney's trip. It came off the heels of what Donald Trump did in Venezuela. It's coming at a time where, as we've talked about on the show, Donald Trump is saying to the world, choose this day who you will partner with. Is it going to be the ChiComs and the Russians and the Iranians and the evil axis, or are you going to be a part of the allied forces, economically and otherwise? That's essentially the geopolitical gamesmanship that's going on here. And I gotta say, we put out the title, are we in a new Cold War? Well, it sure seems like the geopolitical posturing that's going on actually proves our point. But the interesting part is we're not at the table down south with the Americans. We're going to meet with the ChiComs. And it's really interesting because this is what Anita Anand, one of Carney's cabinet members, had to say about the meeting.
Not long ago in your Indo-Pacific strategy, you called China a global disruptive power. Do you still believe
a global disruptive power, right?
China softened?
That's the official position of the Canadians.
This is a new government with a new prime minister, a new foreign policy, and a new geopolitical environment. In this,
if they keep saying it, does it become true? I mean, nobody believes that. Nobody believes that.
Moment of economic stress for our country, it is necessary for us to diversify our trading partners and to grow non-U.S. trade by at least 50% over the next 10 years. The work that we will...
Man, her dialogue is so stilted. It's as though she's trying to recall things that she memorized on the plane trip over. She doesn't know the material well enough, so she can't just talk about it naturally. So she's just trying to okay, what did I remember in the press notes?
Continue to do is to diversify supply chains while continuing to stand up for Canadian interests at every turn.
Not long ago in your Indo-Pacific...
And apparently our interests, according to the Carney government, are partnering with the ChiComs, who he, in his own words, called the biggest security threat to the Canadians. I mean, it's a stunning about-face.
Inflation through the roof.
Food costs went up 10.6% in February.
Censorship of dissident voices, freezing of bank accounts.
Justin Trudeau invoking emergency powers against the truckers. Banks can now freeze their personal accounts, the accounts of anyone linked to the Freedom Convoy.
Digital surveillance and communism spreading.
What do we want?
Basic income! With the basic income, I felt a sense of security because I didn't have to worry about not going hungry and I didn't have to worry about being kicked out of my apartment.
The government is on the verge of bankruptcy and they're coming for your money.
Canada's federal debt increasing in real time, now surpassing $1.2 trillion. This debt is draining taxpayer dollars, with interest alone costing $54 billion this year.
It's time to break free and start saving in money they can't take from you. Since 2013, the folks at Bull Bitcoin have one mission: destroy central banking. Bull Bitcoin is the most trusted Bitcoin company in Canada. They empower you to buy, sell, and pay bills with Bitcoin. They are 100% non-custodial, which means that you always maintain full control over your Bitcoin, allowing you to reclaim your financial sovereignty and secure your wealth for the future. Their customer support will assist you throughout the whole process, helping you get your hands on the hardest money ever created. Escape their financial gulag, click on the link below, and start buying Bitcoin today.
So what can account for this truly stunning about face? Well, perhaps this video of Mark Carney can help us understand. This is from Harrison Faulkner on X. Breaking: Mark Carney slashes Canada's 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs and announces that up to 49,000 Chinese electric cars will be imported into Canada with only a 6.1 tariff. In return, China has agreed to slash tariffs on canola imports from 84% to 15% in March, by March 1st, pardon me. This is what Mark Carney had to say about it.
China's strengths, for example, in electric vehicles are formidable. They're undeniable. These are the most affordable and energy efficient and innovative vehicles.
We should note that these EVs are deliberately slashed. They're marked down to about half the price that it takes to make them so that they can undercut markets, EV markets all around the globe. And when he says they are innovative, it means they're actually spy cars.
In the world. And for Canada to build our own competitive EV sector, we need to learn from, partner with, and access and build supply chains with China. To help deliver on the full potential of these partnerships and to bring down costs for Canadians, we're going to start by allowing up to 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles into the Canadian market.
This is stunning.
At the most favored nation tariff rate, which is 6.1%.
So at the most favored nation rate. That's what China has become to Mark Carney. That's what we've become. Truly amazing. Truly amazing stuff. Here's Mark Carney again.
$20 billion in wages are earned each year by Canadians because of our existing trade relationship. And this is a relationship that has been distant and uncertain for nearly a decade. That has held back investment, it's stalled business growth, and cost Canadian workers good opportunities. And it has had the consequence of leaving us even more dependent on our largest trading partner. And that's why immediately after the election, Canada's new government began to recalibrate our relationship.
So there you have it. This move by Carney is months in the working. Immediately after he was elected, he said. That's his words. Immediately after he was elected, him and his government, under men like Hodgson, who are cozy with China, have a lot of business ties, I should say, in China. They have positioned Canada to become partners with China. And now we wonder why the Americans don't want to have anything to do with us. Here's a great tweet from Glenn Beck. When Canadian PM Mark Carney talks about a new world order, he's serious. He knows it's inevitable. And the world has three options. Right? This is literally what I talked about on the last program. I said this before Glenn Beck. Glenn, are you stealing my stuff? Europe's Great Reset, Carney's original pick, which has been devastated by Trump, obviously. China's global dominance, which, and this is important, allows elites who bow down to China to stay in power, at least for now, or Trump's America First agenda, the only one that gives the people the powers over their planners. And Carney just signed Canadians up for China's tyranny so elites like him can remain in charge. Let that sink in. Well said, Glenn Beck. Well said. And that's what's happened here. Right? And if we think the Americans were unjustified in their attacks on Canadians, in their posture towards Canadians, if my theory is correct that we've talked about in the show that we talked to Sam Cooper about, that Donald Trump is indeed asking the nations of the world, whom will they align with? And Canada, since Carney's been elected, he said, in his own words, has been moving to deepen relationships with China. That explains right there why Donald Trump has been so recalcitrant towards the Canadians. That explains it. Yet here's the amazing part. Here's the baffling part. is the reason that the justification that Mark Carney is going over to China under is this idea that somehow the Americans under Trump are no good, very bad. They're attacking us for no reason. They're starting a trade war for no reason. And they're coming at us. Therefore, we have to diversify. No, what's happened is the Americans have asked you, whose side are you on? And the Mark Carney liberals have said China. That's what they've said. That should give us great pause, because objectively, China is one of the most malign actors on the world stage. And Mark Carney admits it. Right? We know this. I just want to show you. Here's just a deck right beside me of just a few mainstream media headlines on China's threat to Canada. Forgotten in a dark, cruel place, the two Michaels are not the only Canadians held as political prisoners by China. That's right. The Chinese have political prisoners from our nation. Canada's spy chief and Michael Kovrig warned China remains major threat to national security. Liberal MP allegedly tied to Chinese interference sources. China remains a top threat in Canada's spy agency's annual report. RCMP probing comments from Liberal Paul Chang, remember this, about Chinese bounty placed on conservatives. China secretly executed 4 Canadians. A former Chinese prisoner explained why. Police stations in Canada. Money laundering. Racketeering. Schemes that are central to the housing costs in Canada being totally out of whack, especially in Toronto and Vancouver. China has subverted Canadian democracy time and time again. They operate concentration camps in Xinjiang. They harvest organs of political dissidents. They systematically oppress religious minorities, especially Christians. They imprison pro-democracy activists like Jimmy Lai. They interfere in our elections. They put ChiCom losers into politics like Michael Ma. And they operate secret police outlets in Canada. Not to mention being a central cog in the fentanyl trade around the world and drug trafficking. China is an evil empire. And Mark Carney knows it. He said it himself. And if he were actually worried about those who are putting economic tariffs on us, unreliable trade partners, there is no more unreliable trade partner than China. Yet, now, Mark Carney is selling Canadians out to the ChiComs. And in fact, he's furthering the security threat that Canada has become to the United States of America. Just think how Trump's going to react to this. This is out in the open. Right? Just think about how Trump's going to react to this. I even have comments this week, before all this happened. This is what Donald Trump had to say about USMCA, or Kuzma, depending on who you. This is what he had to say.
I don't even think about USMCA. I mean, you know, I want to see Canada and Mexico do well, but the problem is we don't need their product. You know, we don't need cars made in Canada. We don't need cars made in Mexico. We want to make them here. And that's what's happening. Everybody's moving here. From Canada, they're coming here. From Mexico, from Japan, from Germany, from all over the world. They're coming here. They're opening up their plants.
So there you have it. Do you think Donald Trump is going to take this from the Canadians? That when the Americans are worried about the security threat that Canada is to them because they are essentially an outpost of China, do you think he's going to take Canada cozying up even more with the ChiComs? Laying down? Not a chance. Mark Carney is picking a fight with the Americans. And he is ironically cozying up to the same axis of evil that is forwarding all sorts of chaos around the globe, including helping fund and support the Russians in the war in Ukraine. That is totally apparently against the interests of the Canadians. And why? Why is this happening? Well, because those who love globalism and those who love the open society as forwarded by George Soros have always been interested in partnering with the ChiComs. Listen to this old interview. You might recognize it.
What sort of a financial deal should Obama be seeking to strike when he travels to China next month?
You might recognize that voice. That's Chrystia Freeland, Financial Times, interviewing.
No, I think this would be
George
the time
Soros.
because you really need to bring China into the creation of a new world order, financial world order.
There you go.
They are kind of reluctant members of the IMF. They play along, but they don't make much of a contribution because it's not their institution. Their share is not commensurate. Their voting rights are not commensurate to their weight. So I think you need a new world order that China has to be part of the process of creating it, and they have to buy in. They have to own it the same way as, let's say,
Does this language sound familiar? This is Soros, the wizard himself, the man behind the alchemy of finance, is speaking in the exact same way that Mark Carney is in 2026.
The United States owns the Washington Consensus, the current order, and I think this would be a more stable one, where you would have a coordinated policies. I think the makings of it are already there because the G20, in agreeing to peer reviews, effectively.
So there you have it. That's George Soros, everybody. What did he say there? You have to pay attention to that clip because he's saying the old world order, as he's seeing it, is American hegemony, the Pax Americana that I talked about on the last episode. The new world order includes China at the center and the G20 nations and supranational organizations like the UN and all those globalist bureaucratic elites at the center. And this is what Mark Carney's fighting for. Just like Glenn Beck said in his tweet. Because the Europeans are so weak, because the WEF globalist plans and the Great Reset have been exposed, which was Carney's original pick, he's now pivoting to a global order dominated by the Chinese, where hopefully these unprincipled globalist elites can still maintain power so long as they work with the Chinese at undermining American hegemony. I mean, that's what we're dealing with. That's Mark Carney. George Soros, he's enacting Soros's open society policies. He's speaking right from his playbook. And it's stunning. It's absolutely stunning because you have to listen to this exchange in this interview. Even the mainstream media who's allowed to go with Mark Carney and his entourage on this trip, they're highly skeptical about what Carney's doing.
Question about investing in China. There's a ton of experts we've spoken to in the business community in Canada who are gun shy about investing in China.
Yeah,
Ventures
duh.
and such. It's China win. It's not win-win. We're using burner phones for the first time when we covered this because China spies on journalists and businessmen. China intercepts communications. Is China really the right kind of partner for Canadian industry?
Listen, we've been clear-eyed. We're eyes wide open.
We know all that stuff.
There's been investments by Canadian companies for years here. Tomorrow I'm meeting with Magna. Magna, one of the biggest auto parts companies in the world. They have 30,000 people working here. We're meeting with Manulife. We're meeting with BMO. These companies have been in China for years. Now, obviously, we're having these conversations with the Chinese.
And the question is, how are you in China? You're only in China if you play by Chinese rules, right? When we're talking about China, we're talking about literally a fascist state with communist characteristics. The left, the progressives run around with their hair on fire. Donald Trump's a fascist. Donald Trump's a fascist. He's abusing our human rights. He's taking away our rights. Well, everything they accuse Donald Trump of, Xi Jinping and the ChiComs are far worse. They're everything and way worse. And they're actual fascists. In fact, here's just a contemporary example to prove this. Right now in the United States of America, there's protests happening all across the country because of ICE raids, because Donald Trump is trying to send illegal immigrants back to the nations that they came from. And the thing is, if you protested and rioted like the lawless people in Minneapolis, you would either go to jail or be executed in China. Those protests don't happen in China because you're actually dealing with a fascistic, with communist characteristics government. So there is no moral high ground for the Canadians in partnering with the ChiComs against the American. It's ludicrous, utterly ludicrous. And this is who Mark Carney is cozying up with. Mark Carney has sold out Canada to the Aboriginal grift. He's allowing those fake First Nations groups to extort Canadians and destroy our oil and gas industry so that money has to flood into green energy coffers if they're going to survive. Which, just so happens Mark Carney profits off of that. And now he's selling us out to the ChiComs. You know, it's ridiculous, right? White Claypool, he put this together as a joke during the last election. And now we're seeing it come to fruition.
曙光就在前面。10月革命一声炮响，给我们送来了马克思列宁主义，走俄国人的路，这就是结论。5·4运动举起了反帝反封建的旗帜，传播了共产主义思想。
This is the partnership that Canada is making this week. Canada is further opening us to Chinese influence in our nation. They're opening up our autos market to Chinese smart EVs. that are essentially spy mobiles that will undercut the EV market in Canada and destroy EV companies that Canadians, by their taxpayer money through confiscation by our federal government, have sunk billions of dollars into. Mark Carney, our prime chameleon, has finally shown his true colors. It's been hard to discern which way he's going for many. But today he made his decision. When left with a choice, whom will you partner with? The Americans and the Pax Americana, freedom, free markets, or dictatorial tyrannies, the ChiComs and the BRICS nations? Mark Carney has chose China. And you have to look no further than the clip that they shared. Look at that. Michael Ma right up front, smiling, happy. A successful trip for the progressive liberals who have sold out Canadians and their freedoms. But friends, we cannot go quietly. As Canadians, we have to let Mark Carney know that we will not put up with joining the axis of evil. That our fathers and our grandfathers did not fight to keep this country free, so we could sell out our right to worship our Lord in Bill C-9. That we could sell out our freedoms to the ChiComs, and that we could be one of the greatest stages for anti-American foreign operations because we identify primarily as non-Americans. The Canadian complex is deadly. And our little brother syndrome, the envy and the covetousness that goes along with it, has allowed a root of bitterness to grow in Canadians' hearts that is taking us down a primrose path to all sorts of evils. It's shocking. It's unacceptable. And we cannot allow it to happen, because it's for freedom that Christ has set you free. Stand firm and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. Until next time, everybody, God bless.
Liberty Dispatch has been brought to you by SDG Media. If you want to stay in touch with us and all things Liberty Dispatch, join our email list, or support the show, head over to ldcanada.substack.com.